Ohio. Winter light, bus fumes, fluorescent hum. In 1974, a man in a dusty leather jacket stepped into a Greyhound station carrying a suitcase that looked too small to hold a life and too heavy to be empty. He stopped at locker 9, fed coins into the slot, turned the key, left the key behind. Then he walked back through the station doors into a sleek gray afternoon and never came back for it. 52 years later, the station was being gutted, and that locker was still there. Still sealed, still paid for by no one, still waiting like it knew something the town did not. Before midnight, Locker 9 has to give up its name. The old station in Merrill, Ohio, sat at the edge of downtown like a tired animal. The bricks sweated in winter. The windows rattled when trucks rolled by. Inside, the air smelled like wet wool, bleach, burnt coffee, and old radiator heat. Every sound bounced, the squeak of work boots, the grind of a dolly, the far-off buzz of a soda machine that should have died years ago. I was there because the city wanted a short human interest piece on the demolition, forgotten ticket stubs, lost and found relics, nostalgia, easy stuff. Then I met Tino. "You ever open something older than you?" he asked, leaning on a mop handle like it was a rifle. Tino worked nights at the station, part janitor, part security, part unofficial historian. He was compact, restless, impossible not to like. Curly hair stuffed under a station cap. Coffee breath. Kind eyes. He talked like every sentence was trying to outrun the next one. "Old locker in the back," he said, still tagged in the original logbook. "Number 9. Nobody could clear it. Lawyers called it abandoned. City called it property. My grandma called it haunted." He grinned. Then he lowered his voice. "Want to see a ghost?" The back corridor was narrow and cold. The overhead bulbs flickered with that pale hospital light that makes dust look alive. A row of dented metal lockers stood against cinder block walls, most already removed. But Locker 9 remained. Its paint had blistered into gray-green scales. Rust bled down the door from the hinges. The number 9 hung crooked, one screw barely holding. A yellow renovation tag was zip-tied to the latch. "Cut today." Tino tapped the old paper logbook in his hand. "Check this out." The page was brown at the edges, smelling faintly of mildew and tobacco, line after line of names and dates. Then one entry with half the information missing. Locker 9. Paid 24 Hrs, March 18, 1974. Mail. Leather jacket. No return. No name. No address. No claim. Just a station clerk's hurried handwriting and a black ink smudge where a signature should have been. "Who logs a jacket but not a face?" I asked. Tino shrugged. "Someone distracted. Or scared." That's when Buck Harlan stepped in. He had the kind of walk that made hallways smaller. 70 if he was a day. Broad-shouldered, former deputy, current renovation supervisor. His face looked carved with a blunt tool. He smelled like cold air, motor oil, and menthol cigarettes. He saw me near the locker and rolled his jaw once like he'd bitten down on an old memory. "Don't make this into a fairy tale," Buck said. "Town had enough of those in the 70s. He slapped the side of Locker 9 with the back of his glove. "Probably some drifters' junk. Maybe stolen uniforms. Maybe clothes from some biker bum who skipped town." The way he said biker bum told me he'd been saying it for 50 years. Tino looked at me, then at Buck. "Funny thing about junk," he said softly. "It still waits." Buck ignored him. "Lock gets cut at 6. Inventory, disposal, done." He walked away before either of us answered. And that should have been that. Just a local relic, a box of mildew and disappointment. Except people don't tense up like that over nothing, especially not over metal, especially not over 50 years. By late afternoon, word had already spread. Construction crews slowed down near the back hall. A cashier from the diner next door came in, pretending to ask for the restroom. An old man in a VFW cap lingered by the entrance and left without speaking. Everybody knew Locker 9. Nobody knew why. At 5:08 p.m., Tino came back with bolt cutters and a flashlight. You filming? I'm recording. Good, he said, because either we're about to find mothballs or proof that Ohio doesn't believe in endings. The station seemed to hold its breath. Outside, snow hissed against the windows. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed like trapped flies. Tino slid the cutters over the lock. The metal groaned. Once, twice, snap. The sound was small, but in that hallway, it felt enormous. He pulled the lock free. Rust flaked onto the floor like dead skin. Then he looked at me. I looked at the door, and for 1 second, just one, I had the strangest feeling that opening it would not reveal what was inside the suitcase. It would reveal what the town had buried around it. Before midnight, Locker 9 has to give up its name. Tino curled his fingers around the handle and opened the door. The locker door shrieked open on dry hinges, and the smell came first. Not rot. Paper. Dust. Old wool. A faint ghost of cigarette smoke sealed in metal for half a century. Inside sat a small brown suitcase, battered at the corners, leather cracked like riverbeds in drought. One handle had been repaired with twine. It didn't look valuable. It looked careful. That was different. Tino whispered, "Man." The suitcase was set dead center, square to the frame, as if the person who placed it there needed it to look proper, needed it to weigh correctly. I crouched, ran a fingertip over the top. The leather was cold, dry, furred with dust. There was a luggage tag tucked under the handle, blank on one side. On the other, one word in blue ink so faded it was almost a bruise. Eddie. No last name, just Eddie. Buck Harlan appeared at the end of the corridor like he'd been listening for the snap of the lock. "Inventory it," he barked. "Then bag it." Tino didn't move. "You ever let a moment breathe, Buck?" Buck's eyes narrowed. Moments are how people start lying to themselves. He turned and left again. That line stayed with me. Because it didn't sound like a man talking about a suitcase. It sounded like a man defending a verdict. We carried the case to the old ticket counter, where the overhead lights were brighter. Dust motes drifted through the air like tiny ash flakes. Outside, a bus pulled in with a long, wet hiss, headlights smearing across the glass. Somewhere, an announcement crackled and died mid-sentence. Tino put on gloves he definitely found in a drawer labeled First Aid, 1998, and clicked the latches. The suitcase opened. Inside, everything was folded with military precision. On top lay a U.S. Army dress uniform from the Vietnam era. Dark green, brass dulled with age, ribbons still pinned, white shirt beneath, black tie tucked into the collar. The cloth held the dense old smell of cedar and sealed years, not mold. Preservation. Under the jacket sat a pair of tiny knitted baby booties, cream-colored, handmade, no bigger than my palm. Tino stared at them like they might move. "Oh, that's not fair," he said quietly. "That is not fair at all." Beneath the booties was a photograph. A woman standing beside a motorcycle, one hand on the handlebar, chin lifted, smiling at someone outside the frame. The picture had gone soft with age, but not enough to erase her. She wore a denim jacket with a shearling collar. Wind teased her hair across her cheek. Behind her was a clapboard house and a porch with a busted rail. On the back of the photo, written in neat script, "For when she asks who loved her first." El Tino swallowed hard. "Okay, now I'm invested." I lifted the uniform jacket carefully and found the stitched name tape inside. E. Talker then. On a dry cleaner tag pinned near the sleeve seam, a full name, nearly hidden, Edward James Whitaker. Tino looked up. "You know that name?" "No." He did not answer right away. That told me enough. Finally he said, "My granddad used to mention an Eddie Whitaker, not kindly. Said he ran with the Black Vultures Bike Club. Said mothers crossed the street when they heard those engines." There it was, the town's first easy answer. Troublemaker, drifter, biker, dangerous man, a label people can live inside forever, even after they're gone. I turned the photo over again. The ink had bled slightly, but the words still hit clean. For when she asks who loved her first, this was not a stash, not a getaway kit, not random junk. This was a message that had failed to arrive, and that made it heavier than anything locked in steel. Tino dug deeper and found a slim envelope tucked beneath the uniform box lining, but it was empty. The paper had left a pale rectangle where something once sat. Removed, lost, hidden elsewhere. Then another clue, a bus ticket stub, brittle as onion skin. Marrow, OH to Lexington, KY, March 19, 1974, 7:40 a.m., one way. He paid for 24 hours, bought a bus ticket for the next morning, and never came back. Maybe he missed the bus, Tino said. Maybe. But the suitcase was packed too deliberately for missed chances. This looked like a man who had made a plan because plans were all he had left. That's when the station's oldest former clerk called, Marlene Voss, 83, retired. She had heard through 3 layers of gossip and 1 city hall call that Locker 9 was being opened. Her voice on speaker was papery but sharp. "You found the Whitaker locker, didn't you?" Not a question. I asked if she remembered him. A long pause. Then, "I remember what people said. That he was a drifter, that he came back wrong," she said. The words fell colder than the weather. Not drunk. Not criminal. Not wild. Wrong. A label towns use when they don't want to learn the shape of a man's pain. Marlene agreed to let us visit that evening. "Bring the photograph," she said. "Not the uniform. And don't tell Buck." "Why not Buck?" Another pause. "Because Buck likes dead stories better than live ones." That was enough for me. As we repacked the suitcase, Tino found one more thing hidden in the lining, a small silver key taped flat beneath the inner flap. No tag, no marks, just a key. "To what?" he asked. I looked at the booties, at the photo, at the uniform, at the empty space where a letter should have been. Somewhere in this town, Edward Whitaker had been reduced to rumor, to engines, to leather, to fear, but men do not fold dress uniforms around baby booties by accident. Men do not write love into hiding for no reason. And suddenly the story wasn't about what was in Locker 9. It was about who had needed it to stay closed. Before midnight, Locker 9 has to give up its name. And Marlene Voss, the woman everyone thought might help us understand Eddie Whitaker, was about to open a door of her own. Marlene Voss lived in a narrow white house that smelled like starch, soup, and old books. The porch light threw a weak amber circle over peeling steps. Wind chimes clicked against each other in the cold. Inside, the air was warm but anxious, full of the steady ticking of a wall clock and the soft hiss of an oxygen concentrator from the next room. Tino carried the photo. I carried the questions. Marlene opened the door in a cardigan buttoned wrong, gray hair pinned up in a hurry. Her lipstick had faded into the fine lines around her mouth, but her eyes were clear and hard as polished stone. "You took too long," she said. That was our welcome. The living room glowed under 2 lampshades the color of old butter, framed church bulletins, a crocheted blanket, menthol rub in the air. The TV played low with captions on. In the back bedroom someone coughed, deep and wet. "My husband," Marlene said. "COPD. Some nights he remembers my name. Some nights he thinks Nixon's still president." She motioned for us to sit, then didn't. Tino handed her the photograph. The second she saw the woman beside the motorcycle, Marlene closed her eyes. "Lena," she whispered. So the L had a name. "Who was she?" I asked. Marlene did not answer immediately. She kept staring at the picture, thumb trembling on the edge. "She worked the lunch counter at the station for a summer," Marlene said. "Laughed loud, drove men stupid, but Eddie loved her quietly. That's how you could tell it was real." Outside, a truck passed, tires slushing over wet road. Inside, the oxygen machine gave a low mechanical breath. Marlene sat down at last, and the chair sighed beneath her. "Town said he was no good," she continued. "Easy for them. He wore the jacket, rode the bike, kept company with men who looked dangerous. But that's not the same as being dangerous." "Then what was he?" She looked at me like she was measuring whether I deserved the answer. He was a boy who went to war and came back carrying it in his bones. The room quieted around that sentence. He enlisted young, she said. Vietnam. Came back with medals nobody in town wanted to hear about because medals are easier to clap for than trauma is to witness. His folks had moved while he was gone. House sold. Mail returned. He went looking for home and found nothing that still fit. Tino leaned forward. So he joined the Black Vultures? Marlene's mouth tightened. They found him first. Men who understood night terrors. Men who knew why fireworks made your hands shake. Men who could sit in silence for an hour and call it friendship. Not criminals. Not saints. Survivors. Then the caregiving chaos hit. A crash came from the back bedroom. Marlene jolted upright. Walter, we ran in. A lamp had tipped. Walter Voss, all elbows in blankets, was half out of bed, oxygen tubing tangled around his wrist. The room smelled like antiseptic, dust, and panic. He was trying to stand, wild-eyed, sucking for air. The concentrator alarm shrilled. His hands shook so violently the bedside water glass rattled against the table. He thinks he's at the station, Marlene said, breathless. He does this when he dreams. Tino was already moving. He righted the lamp, cleared the path, found the tubing kink beneath the bed rail, and pulled it free. I steadied Walter's shoulders while Marlene pressed his inhaler into his hand. Walter looked at me, then past me into some old year. Don't let him leave the baby, he gasped. Everything stopped. Marlene froze. Walter, she said softly. Who? His eyes darted to the photograph still in Marlene's hand, then to me. Eddie, he whispered. Bus station, rain in his hair, kept saying if Lena didn't make it back, the girl would need the case. Said, if she asks one day, tell her I came back. Tell her I tried. Tino and I locked eyes. There it was, not rumor, memory. Walter sagged back as the oxygen flow steadied. His breathing eased by degrees. Marlene tucked the blanket over him with practiced hands that trembled anyway. For a moment, all three of us just listened to the machine, to the clock, to the old house settling around us. Back in the living room, Marlene opened a drawer in the sideboard and removed a folded piece of paper yellowed to tea-stained brown. I wasn't going to show this, she said. I told myself it was kindness. It was a carbon copy of a station incident note, March 19, 1974, handwritten amendment attached. Mail, Edward Whitaker. Asked if any woman had called for him, became agitated, left suitcase in locker 9, departed on foot before dawn. At the bottom, another line in different handwriting, Deputy B. Harlan advised no further contact. Let him drift. Buck, of course. Hope allied, disappointment. Marlene had known more than she admitted. She had remembered. She had kept the paper hidden for decades. Maybe to protect herself. Maybe to protect the town from shame. Either way, truth had sat in a drawer while a man's name went bad in public. Why keep this, I asked. Marlene stared at the note. Because I was a coward with good manners. No defensiveness. Just the bruise of honesty. Then she gave us the real breadcrumb. Lena's full name was Lena Serrano. And there was talk she had gone to a county home outside Bell River before the baby was born. Unwed girls disappeared that way in those years. Quietly, respectably, cruelly. Tino exhaled through his teeth. So the suitcase wasn't for Lena. No, Marlene said. She looked toward Walter's room. It was for the daughter. On the walk back to the car, the night air cut sharp and metallic in my lungs. Snow had turned to freezing rain. Streetlights haloed in mist. Tino clutched the photo under his coat like it was warm. We thought we were opening a locker, he said. What did we open? He looked back at Marlene's lit window. A father who got filed under the wrong word. Before midnight, Locker 9 has to give up its name. And now we had a name for the woman in the photo, a daughter somewhere out there, and one man in town who had helped bury both. Buck Harlan. Morning came in steel blue layers, with freezing rain ticking against the station windows like impatient fingers. The coffee in the break room smelled burned enough to strip paint. Tino had not slept. I could tell because he was talking even faster than usual, carrying a legal pad full of names, arrows, dates, and one underlined phrase in block letters. WHO was the suitcase for. County home records, church baptism logs, closed adoption lists, motorcycle club rosters, veteran registries, he said, pacing. And I called my aunt, who knows everybody unethical within 100 miles. You say that like it's a profession. In Ohio? It is. The Black Vultures turned out not to be the horror story Buck had sold the town. Their surviving members, now mostly in their 70s and 80s, met at a social hall outside Bell River once a month. Pancake breakfasts, memorial rides, VA fundraisers, leather vests over orthopedic shoes. Their unofficial keeper was a man named Sonny Vale. He agreed to see us after one sentence. We found Eddie Whitaker's suitcase. The hall smelled like syrup, engine oil, and lemon floor cleaner. A jukebox in the corner glowed red but played nothing. On the walls, patches, photos, military portraits, faded memorial cards, men with long hair and old pictures, men with canes under them now. Sonny had thick white brows, a denim vest, and hands like roots. When he heard Eddie's name, his whole face changed. You found his case? He said. Not found. Like it had been missing from the living. We showed him the photograph and the booties. Sonny sat down hard. Lord, he breathed. He really left them. Then he told us the piece that made everything click. Eddie Whitaker had not joined the Vultures to become someone worse. He joined because he was trying not to die alone. Night sweats, flashbacks, startle rage, shame, the stuff towns call bad attitude because it's easier than saying wound. The Vultures were Vietnam guys, Korea guys, brothers of brothers. They taught him how to breathe through panic on the side of a road, how to ride when sleep wouldn't come, how to keep his hands busy fixing engines instead of breaking things. He'd sit with the little guys after meetings, Sonny said, eyes on the booties. The young dads, ask what formula cost, how much cribs ran, what babies outgrew first. He carried around this idea that he had one shot to do right by a little girl he hadn't met yet. Did he know for sure it was a girl? I asked. Sonny smiled sadly. No, he hoped. The suitcase was his emergency plan. If Lena came back to the station, she'd get the case. Uniform, photo, money once hidden in the missing envelope, and a note for the child. Something clean, something formal. Proof that whatever the town said, her father was not nothing. Then Sonny's expression darkened. He went to Buck first. That tracked. Why? Because Buck's sister worked intake over at the county home. Eddie thought Buck could help him find Lena before the baby got placed. Buck told him he'd look into it. He never did. Or worse, he did, and chose silence. Temptation villain. Old identity keeper. The man who preferred Eddie as a warning label instead of a wounded veteran who deserved help. Why would Buck do that? Tino asked. Sonny looked toward the memorial wall. Because in those days, a biker was easier to throw away than a system was to admit it hurt people. He handed me a cigar box full of old documents and photographs. Eddie left some things with me before he vanished. Said if he didn't come back by summer, maybe he didn't deserve to. Inside, VFW forms. A Purple Heart copy. A commendation. A Polaroid of Eddie beside a motorcycle, younger than his reputation, tired eyes, gentle mouth. And at the bottom, a half-torn county receipt with a woman's name typed in full. Lena Serrano, female infant transferred under private arrangement, April 1974, and a destination code. Tino slapped the table. That's it. That's the trail, not complete, but enough. The code led us to records from a church-run maternity home closed in the 80s, then transferred twice, then half-digitized by the county. It took hours, 3 calls, 1 favor, and Tino's aunt doing something she later described as morally adjacent. But by dusk, we had a probable match. The baby from the 1974 transfer. Now 51 years old. Her name was Elena Hart. She lived 40 minutes away in Dayton County. Married once, divorced, no children listed, worked as a respiratory therapist, which felt almost cruelly poetic after Walter's oxygen alarm. When I called, she nearly hung up twice. "I think this is about your father," I said. Silence. Then, "My adoptive mother told me there was no father worth finding." I looked at the booties on the desk, at the uniform, at everything time had failed to destroy. "I don't think that was true." Another silence, longer this time. Finally she said, "Come tonight." The drive out was black road and windshield rain. Headlights smeared silver across wet fields. Tino sat beside the suitcase like it was a passenger. No jokes now, just nerves. "What if she hates him?" he asked. "What if she doesn't?" He nodded once. At Elena's house, the porch light was already on. But we weren't the only ones pulling in. Behind us, one by one, headlights curled into the driveway. Large bikes. Slow, controlled, deep-throated engines. The old guard. Sonny had made calls, and suddenly I understood. This was no longer about solving a mystery. This was about correcting a funeral that never happened. Before midnight, Locker 9 has to give up its name. And in the next few minutes, a daughter who had been told she was unwanted was about to meet the proof that she had been prepared for. Elena Hart opened the door before we knocked. She had Lena's eyes. That was the first shock. Same steady gaze. Same chin lifted a little, like she'd learned long ago not to ask her room for permission. Her house smelled faintly of eucalyptus, laundry soap, and something simmering with garlic in a crock pot. Soft yellow light. Neat entryway. 1 pair of work shoes by the mat. A life built carefully. Then she saw the suitcase, and all the practiced calm in her face cracked. We sat at her dining table under a hanging lamp that threw a warm circle over the leather case. Rain tapped the windows. Outside, motorcycles idled low in the driveway like patient thunder. Tino stood off to one side, hat in hand, suddenly shy in the presence of a moment that mattered. Elena did not touch the suitcase right away. "Tell me first," she said. So I did, not every detail, just the truth in the right order. Locker 9, the uniform, the booties, the photograph, Eddie Whitaker, Vietnam, the town calling him a drifter. The vultures becoming the brotherhood that kept him breathing. Lena disappearing into a system designed to make shame look tidy. A suitcase packed as an emergency plan for a daughter he might never get to hold. Elena listened without blinking. Then she laughed once. A broken sound. "All my life," she said, "I imagined 2 possibilities. Either he was dead, or he left because he didn't want me." No one spoke. Because there is no quick answer to 50 years of absence. Only evidence. I opened the suitcase for her. The old leather creaked. The room filled again with paper, wool, cedar, the sealed smell of a life interrupted. Elena touched the uniform sleeve with the back of 2 fingers, as though testing whether grief had temperature. Then the booties. That did it. She covered her mouth. "He bought these?" "Maybe someone made them for him," I said. "But he kept them." Under the lining, tucked where Tino had found the silver key, we discovered one final thing we had missed before, a hidden stitch pocket, opened only when Elena's fingers pressed the seam just right. Inside was a folded note, thin as dry leaves. The missing letter. Her hands shook so hard she asked me to read it aloud. It was short. Spare. Written by a man who had already used up his extra words just surviving. "To my little girl, if this reaches you, I came back. That matters to me. They may tell you I was late, or wild, or no good. I was hurt, and I was trying. This suit is for the part of me that stood up straight. The photo is for the part that loved your mother. The booties are because I believed you were coming. If I do not get to meet you, do not let them call you abandoned. You were waited for. Your father, Eddie." By the end, I could barely get the words out. Then came the knock. Sonny stood on the porch in the rain, hat off, white hair plastered back, leather vest dark with water. Behind him were 8 elderly bikers in a loose line, bent shoulders, scarred hands, polished boots. On each vest, old patches and small military pins. One man carried a folded flag case. Another held his helmet against his chest. Elena looked at me. I nodded. She opened the door. Cold air spilled in, carrying rain, exhaust, wet denim, and the deep mineral smell of asphalt after a storm. The engines cut. Silence spread across the driveway. Sonny stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said, voice rough, "we should have done this 50 years ago." Then the old guard raised their hands in the missing man's salute. Not flashy, not theatrical, just devastating. One rider rolled forward a single unmanned motorcycle and let the headlight burn into the rain, representing the brother who never made it home to his own ending. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth again and walked onto the porch like she was moving through a dream somebody else had owed her. Buck Harlan didn't come. Maybe shame kept him away. Maybe pride. Maybe old men sometimes choose silence because speaking would require them to admit the damage they helped do. But by then, Buck didn't matter, because the story had outlived him. The town had called Eddie Whitaker a drifter. The suitcase said father, the uniform said soldier, the old biker said brother, and the woman on the porch crying in the rain with knitted baby booties in her hands said what mattered most. "He didn't leave nothing," she whispered. "He left me proof." That is the thing about metal boxes and old rumors. One keeps what was placed inside it. The other grows teeth in the dark. For 52 years, Locker 9 held a man exactly where a frightened town had put him. Unnamed, unopened, easier to misunderstand than to mourn. But in the end, truth did what truth always does when somebody finally has the courage to lift it into the light. It changed the shape of the dead, and it gave something back to the living. Before midnight, Locker 9 has to give up its name. It did. Edward James Whitaker, war hero, brother, father, not a drifter, not a ghost, just a man who loved his daughter long enough for that love to survive in the dark until someone finally opened the door.